So this gentleman shows up at the dairy one day, and all I know is a heifer buyer's coming in to buy heifers. That's what Matt told me. He said, "You want to take care of them?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take care of them. Lock the heifers up, make sure he gets in the right group." So I did that, and then this older gentleman crawls out, and I look at him like, "You must be Bob Stamey." Bob Stamey is Stamey Cattle Company from North Carolina. He's the same individual that bought the cows at the farm I was previously working at in Millersburg, Ohio, which was Lauren Dairy. So he looked at me, he's like, "My nickname's BJ." He's like, "Oh, you must be BJ." So that's how we got linked up. Later, a couple months later, after that, he was like, "You know, I might need your help." He said, I really need somebody to take care of her health out in the isolation facility in Pennsylvania. There are 2 isolation facilities out in Pennsylvania, and there's one in North Carolina. He said, "I really need somebody to run out there, take care of these heifers while they're in isolation prior to shipment for, month and a half, whatever it takes." So I was like, "Oh, that'd be interesting enough, I could do that." So I agreed to doing that, and then a little bit later, he's like, "I really need a cowboy on the ship. I need somebody to be able to, monitor her health on the ship and stuff like that." So I was like, "Well, I've never done that." But the challenges and doing something that's completely out of your comfort zone is like, but why not? So we talked, and I finally agreed to doing that. So what I want to share with you tonight is we'll start off at the isolation facilities, a couple photos there, and then we'll go on the ship, across the pond, and then we'll end up in Morocco. I was in the country for 12 days. During those 12 days, I had 2 days off. So one time I went in and visited an older city, and another time I went out in the mountains, just a little sightseeing, so we'll have a couple pictures of that as well. Okay, so, is my mic on, Nancy?
I think you just have to hold it up closer.
Yeah, it is on.
Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, so this is just a photo. This photo is from Andrews Farms. So I traveled out there one Friday afternoon, I believe, the first time I went out to Wilkinson's farm, and it was late at night, and these semis were still pulling in. This picture here, I was teasing my wife, that's my style of Christmas lights. We had a thing that she wanted to put Christmas lights in the front porch, and I was like, "Nah, we do the front porch, we got to do the whole house." But I said, "This is my style of Christmas lights." So this is close to 11 o'clock. These guys rode all the way in from Colorado. On that picture on the far right, there's 2 more semis waiting to unload while this one's backing up. So, and this farm had 916 animals. There's another farm, the second one we'll get to a little bit later. Langenburg, PA, this farm was literally, one of their pasture fields was on the Delaware line. So I'll have a picture of that line here soon. So these are my girls the next morning. They just look a little hungover. Some of them had literally a 26-hour truck ride to get to where that farm was. So they're a little tired, but they got out of it pretty quick. And then, I don't know, was it you that was telling that cows have personalities and stuff like that? So my pet, we always had a pet somewhere. Every group had a pet. So the next picture is my pet. This is this girl, when you get in the barn with her from Andrews, she would literally follow you around. She would steal your gloves from your back pocket or play with your water bottle. And then if you tried to ignore her, she would headbutt you. So that was the first girl that met me there at Wilkinson Farm, and then the next morning she came up for a hug. And by the way, I know exactly which pen she was on the ship and where she was at and which pen in Morocco too. So this was at the isolation facility. Their feet bunks, just walking through, making sure everybody's doing okay. This picture's those little goofy pictures. They always like to stand on top of the water troughs. That one on the right just enjoyed her breakfast, I think. So while they were in isolation, that picture on the left is a picture of the inside room and a hydraulic shoot. While they were in isolation, those animals had to go through some extensive vaccination program, palpation, pregnancy checks. A lot of testing had to be done before they even qualified to go. So we had to run 916 animals through this shoot in 2 days' time, and made for a long, long day. Where that gentleman's standing at, I had the job of being around the head and operating the chute, so there's about 5 people there. I was on my watch. I was looked at it like a 6-foot circle. I walked over 5 miles in about 14 hours, 2 days in a row, to get those heifers through to get them vaccinated. Second picture is just a heifer in the chute with a little close-up. This picture I put in here just because it's got some history behind it. This is also at Wilkinson's farm. On the far right, you can see the Delaware line. The trees up there are the Delaware line. But this barn here in May 14th of 1982, I would have been a little more than 1 year old. President Reagan visited this farm, flew in there with his helicopter and gave a speech. You can Google it on YouTube. It's a fun little fact for you. Old stone barn, very, very neat. So after we had their first round of vaccinations done, this had to be repeated twice, but we had a 2-week window in between. We let them out on this big pasture field. Man, those girls were happy there. You can see all the way across the valley on the far side. Those heifers are like just having a heyday. Beautiful sunset at the Wilkinson's farm. If you remember 2 slides ago, I showed you the Delaware line. Here I am standing on the Delaware line facing the other way on those pasture fields. Okay, now we jump back to Spring Run, PA. This is the Hammond Farm, and that's the other isolation facility that I also help take care of. So my schedule was kind of 1 week out, 1 week back at Andrews, 1 week out, 1 week back. Sometimes give or take a day or 2. So the next couple pictures is going to be from Hammond's farm. Here's another just pointing the other direction back towards the hill where I shot the first picture. Okay, this is going to be a video. Let's see how well that plays. Standing in the middle of a pasture field. They're always curious animals. If you stand long enough, they'll have you around it. But that's my sea of heifers right there. I believe there's 583 in this group. Okay, this is on the inside of the building. They had 2 head chutes, but they were all manual, not hydraulic, so we had to set up. There's probably 6 or 8 people there that day. And again, where that white 5-gallon bucket is at, I was switching between those and the little wooden stand you see on the right-hand side. I had to go in, we had to change out ear tag, we had to put a export ear tag in, we had to put a federal 15-digit RFID tag in, we had to cut out the old IDs, verify that in the computer, vaccinate them, palpate them, pull blood, all in the same shot. So we're always going back and forth, back and forth. While one chute was empty, the other team was working on filling the opposite chute. So there again, we did many a mile in a 5-foot circle. This is, we're just letting heifers over on the other pasture across the street, which is lined up. Semis there across the street, and neat little sunrise there. And then we have one more sunset, and then we're ready for the boat. So this is just off of Google Maps, the port of Wilmington, Delaware. You see the blue arrow is actually where we loaded the port where we loaded the ship at. So it's kind of an L sticking out there in the water. That's actually where the ship was located at. All right, so this is going to be my home away from home for 12 days. The trip was supposed to take 10 days, but we had a 2-day delay at the port when we got to Morocco site. And a lot of people ask me, Holstein Express, is that the real name? Yes, it's the real name. It was the oldest ship that this company had, built in 1991, 357 foot long, 65 wide, and it weighed over 7,000 ton. It could run almost 4,000 ton. So, not the biggest ship, but I think it's still big enough. So this is just prior to going through the gate at Delaware. You can see the semis just starting in. We had to stop there and get an escort to get in there. So all the hay was compressed into 80-pound bales, and they were literally 3 foot long, stacked on pallets, and they were hoisted on top of the ship, all the way on the top with a crane. And the bedding was just bags of sawdust or shavings. That was also all the way, hoisted all the way to the top of the boat. And that's what they're loading here. Here, the grain that went in there was pelletized. Everything was pelletized, and the John Deere tractor is actually blowing it up into the silo. There's 2 silos, one in the back and one at the front of the ship. And that's what they're doing here. And by the way, that blower was loud. So here I'm from the top deck, taking a picture down. We could back up a semi from either way, and then the chute would come up like the Y to unload the heifer from the semis. And that's how we were pretty much at 10:15, we were getting ready to load animals. And this was, if you remember, my first date on there was December 4th. That's when the whole isolation, vaccination, everything started. Now we're finally, after I think we had 3 delays, ship was delayed 3 times. Now we're in February 10th, and we're finally ready to load these animals on. So it's a long process. This is a short video of the inside of the ship while it's empty. Just a lot of pipes and a lot of welding in there. They had 2 rows of so-called box stalls on either side, a feed alley in the center, and a feed alley on both outside edge. Video show up okay in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's the first girls coming on the ship. And if you look at the picture on the left, you look, that's steps going down. And then you see a white hard hat and a piece of yellow or orange jacket. That's a gentleman down there. He is actually 2 stories below from where I am at on that ship, chasing them, making sure to go around the corner and loading them in there. This was a picture from the inside after we had them loaded. They're kind of like, good to lay down. Here's another picture from another deck. So we had a total of 1,800 animals, 367 pens spread out through 7 decks. The ship was a total of 8 decks high, but we only had animals on 7 decks. I think we were about at 85% of that ship's capacity with animals. So we could have got more on there if we had more to go. And these pens, what I would do is I would walk through the animals twice a day. Our schedule was up at 6, breakfast at 6, go out, feed grain, break time at 10, or coffee break is what we call it, at 10. And then we go out and feed hay. No, excuse me, we dropped the hay. We had to get hay from top deck down. We dropped the hay, and then we had lunch, and then we fed hay till 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock from there on out was just walking through, cleaning, making sure bedding, whatever had to be done. And during the pellet feeding and the hay feeding, I was making sure I was walking through every pen of that ship every day. And the most I walked, according to my watch, was close to 7 miles on that ship. So it was between 5 to 7 miles walking. It got a little tiring sometimes. But one good thing about the ship, we ate like kings. There's always good food there. And you know cattle haulers, they always like colorful trucks. Had to take a picture of that one. And behind the semi, you can see pallets of hay sitting there, where the crane is actually loading it on top there. That orange is our lifeboat. My cabin was just on the inside of that lifeboat. Gave me a little piece of mind. So here's Dave and his mom and dad. Dave is the one on the left, and that's what the three. Bob is the one on the right. He's the one that started Stamey Cattle Company. So after unloading all the animals, our last truck is finally leaving here. 42 semi-loads of heifers to get that ship loaded. And it was, we started earlier, but by the first animal got on at 10:15 in the morning, and this is 10:30 at night, and we're planning on setting sail at 11 o'clock. We're pushing it tight. So sorry about this picture. I have my wide-angle camera on this one, but this is kind of my little cabin. You get basically a bunk bed, window, a bunch of cupboards. I should have took a picture of it with all my supplies in there. I had boxes of records, boxes of vaccination certificates, health papers, and all that stuff. I had to have a copy for the Moroccan Authority. I had to have a copy for the co-op that has it, as well as a copy for the individual farmer who got it. So I had over 5 boxes of paper. It's kind of a little pressure on you to know that you're the one in charge of that. Man, if you drop that going up and down the walkway off the ship, ends up in the water, it would be not good. So here's what it looked like the first morning. Typical Ohio February weather, just dark and cloudy, or cloudy, I should say. We're sailing northeast, 15.2 knots. That's pretty much top speed there. And this is just a picture out of the back of the ship. And by the way, when I took this picture, I was sick. My first day was not good. My wife was like, "You gonna get sick?" I was like, "No, I've been on Lake Erie a lot of times, it's no big deal." No, I had to take some medicine. And by day 2, my brain and my body fully adjusted to it. The weird part about it is when we stopped, my head was messed up. I mean, it was just like, it was wanting to move and shit wasn't moving, you know? I had a splitting headache when we stopped. I didn't really feel like I had to throw up, but I still had a very headache, a lot of headache, you know? Okay, here's gives you an idea. You see where my home's at, and then we fly to Delaware, and then Morocco is where we would actually land at there. So here's the boys feeding. That picture on the left, you can actually see a small gray spout by about knee high. That was the spigot where the grain come out of the silo. They would fill those bags, fling them on their shoulder, and walk down the alley and just open up the bag a little bit and keep walking. Everything was manual. Here's cows as far as you can see it. So that's only one half of, bless you, that's only one half of the ship. And you can see the sign over here, which is a neat thing, that made my job a whole lot easier. So if I had a cow that was sick or lame or had an injury or something, they had an empty hospital pen on every deck of the ship. So I would locate that cow, mark her, move her to that pen, and then I would know where she's at, and I could give her the proper care. Really made my job easier. So weather all the way over there. As soon as we got out of, seemed like we got south far enough, we threw our coats. It was 65 degrees by that weekend already. And you guys here were freezing from February. So here's one of my favorite is sunrise and sunsets. So I got a couple of nice ones here. This is one of the earlier sunsets. This picture is just the sunlight on the water, and it's just mind-boggling to see that much water for that many days. So here's the crew. That Saturday night we had a party on the upper deck. You can see the water in the background. And that gentleman that's sitting behind the fire, he's actually roasting a turkey. So he had turkey, the cook made a whole bunch of stuff. And remember I said we ate well. We had turkey, I'm not sure what kind of soup you'd call it. And then we had Milwaukee Best. And the problem with that was it was room temperature. Only the captain had his cool. Everybody else was drinking room temperature. And the one thing, these guys were from Filipino, so they love to sing. A lot of guys said we can't sing worth a hoot, but we love to try. So we sit around the fire and everybody would take turns doing karaoke. So here was the highlight of the trip, a new baby. When we loaded her, I was like, man, I think we're gonna have to move her to deck 5 because that was where the milking station was actually at, because she's gonna have a baby before we get there. And lo and behold, she did. And I tell you, the boys, the crew, I call them the boys. So we had about 33 crew members, all from Filipinos. Those guys were just, I mean, I couldn't milk this thing alone. I mean, I had 2 or 3 of them on helping me milk and helping me feed the calf. I mean, what are you gonna, what they would call me was stocky, which is short for stockman, which is term they use for, you know, a veterinarian or something on the ship. They were always going, Stocky, hey Stocky, when are you gonna milk the cow? I wanna help feed the baby. Here's a close-up of the little guy. They call him Junior. And here you can see there's 2, this is the same feeding, but there's literally 2 people feeding the same calf, and there's another one just, you can see his boots there. He's just like, when can I have a turn? So here's how we milk a cow on a ship. Put a halter on her, pinch her behind a gate. You know, Heifers, I had to milk 3 of them because we had 2 abortions and 1 full-term calf. It's kind of neat actually, because Heifers are usually not used to being milked, so they kick. How many dairy farmers do we have here? Have any dairy farmers? We have a couple. Okay. So you know what we're talking about. But they're so worried about balancing themselves, they don't even kick. I told Matt that I was on the phone with him while still over there. I said, I think every heifer should be milked on a ship for the first time. They can't kick. And so here's the sunrise out of the front of the boat from deck 4. You talk about, that's a reason to get up early right there. Plus drink coffee. Yeah, I was trying to make sure I was at the decks, the right decks, because there's like 3 decks that were below the water. So I had to get on deck 4 or above in order to get a sunrise or something like that. So always when the sun's setting and sunrise, and I was always on one of those decks, or made sure I could be if at all possible. This is the same location, just out front. Not a sunset or anything, just the same location. So here we have guys with the crane on top dropping skids of hay bales down the cargo hold. So that would drop all the entire deck. So they would drop maybe 4 or 5 skids at the first deck, close the lid, and then they would go on deck number 2 and deck number 3 all the way up. And it was a couple of hours worth of work doing that every day. So these guys, there's another feeding time. This one guy got smart and he used a wheelbarrow. And that's actually a wheelbarrow full of sawdust for bedding. And those guys are on a smoke break. And that cruise, I was amazed. I'm used to working with Hispanic guys, so I know a little bit of Spanish. Their Spanish has a different dialogue to it. But the nicest people you'll find on anywhere. These guys, they would sign up to go on a ship. It was an 8-month contract, give or take a month. and then they would be off for 3 months and they would sign up again. These guys would make $1,000 a month doing that. I was like, $1,000 a month, I'm not sure I'd do that. How hard they work. I said, how much you get paid back home? We're lucky, good paying jobs is $5 to $8 a day, US dollars. So these guys, they're like, we can work for 8 or 9 months, we can walk around like kings back home. Because they have, you know, a whole lot more money than what a lot of people have back home. The deck boss, I don't have a picture of him here. He's an older guy. He was kind of the supervisor there. They all called him deck boss. And he was doing this for 12 years. That was his job for 12 years. And it's almost never on the same ship. So it's, you know, could be any other ship. So think about it. 3 months out of the year, he had 2 girls back home and a wife. 3 months out of the year, he would see his family. And then he would be on a ship again. How lucky are we? So here's lunchtime again for the cows. Here's another beautiful sunset. Here's a small video clip of the bridge. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to take a video of it, so kind of made it quick behind somebody's back. So the captain was actually from Russia, and I was surprised he did pretty well with English. And then there's 2 engineers that were from Ukraine, and the rest of the crew was from Philippines. So here's the guys at lunchtime. In the picture at left, actually chief officer, and I just talked about the deck boss. He's across the table there. And one of the Ukrainian engineers actually got his back turned there. You talk about hospitality. I walked in there. They actually had me over in the officer's lunchroom because I was supposed to be one of those important guys. And like, listen, guys, I'm just a redneck. I'm just a cowboy from the country, you know. So I started eating over here, but my plate was always fixed, always sitting at the head of the table. And if somebody was sitting at that chair, they would always get up and move. And then we're done. I could never take my plate to the sink. The mess boy, which is the guy who kind of does the dishes, they call him mess boy. He would always get up and, oh, I got it. He would never let me take my plate to the sink. He would always take care of everything. So hospitality was just phenomenal. And I had the same experience in Morocco as well. So here's some of the other guys at the other end of the room eating. You can see the interaction. Great guys to work with. So here's directly behind the ship facing down. I kind of risked of dropping my phone, but I just thought I had to get a video of this. Make you seasick just watching it, huh? I tried not to think what would happen if I lost my phone right there. Yep, we're still off. So this video is a little bit confusing. What I was trying to do is get a video showing through the window, so people can actually see how much the boat actually rocks. We never had a lot of waves. We had no storms, no rain or anything, but we had a lot of swales. So those swales would rock that ship. So here's the video. I'm standing in the center of the ship, and I'm trying to hold my phone as still as possible, zoom out through the window so you can see the water and the clouds, so you can see how far it rocks. Takes a little bit until you can see it.
We don't get to see stuff.
You get to look at the picture on the wall. So you'll see, okay, now we're getting up. You see nothing but clouds. And then it tilts down, you see nothing but water. And a lot of water. And then we got clouds again. And now we got water coming up. That's what the ship would do pretty much the entire time. No wonder I was seasick the first day. But after that, your brain kind of adjusted to that, and you would walk down the ship like you're on flat surface. It's funny how it worked, but at first you're just holding on to everything. And if you remember the map I showed you from Delaware to Morocco, every time I was in the cabin, which was pretty much in the bridge, we had a meeting. I had a meeting with chief officer and the captain every day, and you always see on their monitor there was a line, just a U-shaped line coming down through, and we would never be on that line. Every time either the ship was on the bottom or on the top of the line, I'm like, why are we never on the line? Because I asked too many questions. He said, well, we zigzag to cut down the rocking from the swales. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. These guys actually thought that through, because that's hard on animals when they're laying down and they're shifting. They can get almost like bed sores, from laying down. We call them hop sores in the dairies. But that's why they did that. So the ship was doing this pattern all the way across the ocean, only when we had swales. So we had swale almost every day. So this is a video on the inside of the ship, just a little scan around. The ceiling was surprisingly low. I mean, I could actually touch the ceiling if I was standing there. I kind of expected it to be a little more height, but when you have a ship and you need to get as many animals on as possible, you make it as tough as you can. So here is probably one of my favorite sunrise. I think this was at day 8, and I was feeling a little homesick, and I was just kind of getting ready to get this over with, and then we had this sunrise. Kind of lifted my spirits. That's the same picture, just from a different angle of the window. So the next photo, my wife sent me this one. So you can see we're right here. We're still a day away from Agadir, which is straight across. We passed in between these two islands. There's an island up here and an island down here behind this sign here. And my phone actually updated, so I was very thrilled. The struggle I had was I still had Ohio time, so every other day we had a time change. So I had to go look at, okay, what are we? Oh, it's time +5. But it's lunchtime. It was a mess because every other day we had time change, and then you also had to, your sleeping was always interfered, and your waking time was always interfered. By the time we got over here, we had one more time change here, and then we'd have been in Agadir, which was 6 hours ahead from where we are now. So this was a pretty happy sight. So we roll in there. I should have got a topographical map of this one. Basically, it's tucked up against the mountain, beaches down towards the south and mountains up towards the north. Just kind of tucked right in there at the edge. Another picture out the back. So here's the beach. I was not here. This picture, my agent actually, so I had an agent that would communicate with me on Morocco side. And he actually sent me this picture. And that's him right there. So while I was on the ship, I had an hour and a half Wi-Fi per day. And with that hour and a half, I would try to email and update Stamy Cattle Company on the process, how things are going. I would try to, COPAC is the co-op over in Morocco, and Ayoub was the guy's name. I was communicating with him. I was communicating with this agent here. This is the export agent, and talking to my wife and my family all in an hour's time. I think I only fell asleep one time during our conversation, because I always wait till last to talk to her so I could use the rest of my internet or Wi-Fi. So here's what it looked like out the site. actually 40 trucks there if you dare to count them. And remember, we rolled in there about 7 o'clock by the time we got everything tied up, and then we had to drop the stairway down, get the people on, and we had to do inspections over there as well. Everything had to be inspected, making sure it's okay, the animals are in good health, everything is clean, everything is right. And then only could we unload. So 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock, that's all those hours, and I was like, just let these cows off, just give them their freedom back, you know? But no, everything had to be inspected. Here we are unloading. That night we unloaded till 2 o'clock in the morning. And then Sunday morning we had rain. So they unloaded a couple of trucks and they said, no, can't do it. I'm not quite sure why. These heifers came from as far as Colorado. They're in Ohio, Pennsylvania wintertime. They're used to the rough and tough weather. But these animals it was time to get them off the ship because they had a lot of climate changes, environmental stress, all that stuff was stacking up. They had food changes as well. So you can usually get away with one stress, but you do 2 or 3 stress on the animals, they'll start showing. So this is the starting point. The red dot is at Agadir. So that you can see they had to run through the mountains. The green line is actually the road up to Taroudant. Once they got up there, there's an isolation facility up there, and those heifers had to stay there for another 4 weeks before they could go out to the individual farms. So that's where, when I was in the country, that's what I was doing on the isolation facility over there as well. Here's a quick video from the other side of the ship on the port. Kind of gives you an idea how big it is. So that's the actual opening where we sailed through to come in there. So this is a happy sight here. The last semi leaving, and yes, it was midnight or a little bit past. Now it was time to get my stuff off the boat, hook up with a taxi driver who couldn't speak English, and head for a 2-hour ride to the hotel. I didn't know, should I go to sleep and let him take care of it, or should I make sure I stay awake, he doesn't do something to me? At that point, you just trust God. But yep, there you go. They use those semis because they're lower to the ground. So most of those were heifers that were okay, but there were also the heifers that were in the hospitals or the animals that had their babies. So those needed a little special, more room to be transported. The trucks you seen earlier, they would hold 12 to 15 animals on those little trucks. So we get over to our hotel. This is the next morning. The picture, obviously I got there a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. Everything was dark, and we walk on this long walkway back in. I could tell it was beautiful, but I couldn't see anything. I was tired. And so the next morning, I shut everything off and went to sleep because I was on that ship for 12 days, working, 12 plus hours a day, walking, how many miles. So that was my hotel room right there. So the next morning I woke up around 10 and just kind of got out and kind of, like, where am I? Well, it looked like paradise around here. So I stepped out, and by that time the restaurant, the chef was there. He said, "You ready for your breakfast?" He knew I was in late, so he didn't want to wake me up. At noon, this would have been Monday, that afternoon, they had arranged a tour guide to take me into the city of Taroudant. So next couple pictures will be of Taroudant. If you have any time, look at that. It's an ancient city. So you could get carriage rides there. You can see the old stone walls. Here's more pictures of stone walls. There's my buddy. So he took me to this old marketplace. It was interesting. You could buy anything you needed and everything you didn't need, from grain to clothing to chickens to ducks and bunnies. So this guy actually ended up buying some carpets from this guy. We went in his shop, he had a lot of antiques. So all the stacks of stuff behind there is actually hand woven carpets. The ladies make those over there and takes them from 10 months to a year to make one carpet. So I bought each as a kid one there, just as a memory. So if you ever wonder what it's like driving through an old city, here we go. So this bicycle, that's just normal. See that everywhere. Like, hey, I can get through there. I was gonna put sound on it, but he had the music up too loud, so I didn't want to bore you with that. So watch the intersection here. This is kind of interesting. Where's the stop sign? There's somebody behind me. Come on, Grandpa, get it out of the way. Someone going around. See that kid running around the front there? It's no big deal. That's just the way they travel. They're just used to that. I'll let you walk down the middle of the road here. That's crazy. I was just blown away. Like, I see pictures of that, but I've never been in it. But now I have. Here's that bicycle that we just passed a while back. My arm's getting a little sore right there. And so that's the old city of Taroudant, and then the new city is right here. And it's completely different. It's actually built together. They call that, the old city, they call it the inner city. So this is a small clip of the new city. And yes, there's more bicycles and more mopeds on the road than cars over there. Their gas was $3.24 a liter, 324 dirhams a liter. I wrote that dirham equation down, and would be, to think for a second, is 8.95. $1 would get you 8.95 dirhams. $1 would, $1 US dollar. So here is one of the factories, and that website, if you want to go to that website, you can learn a little bit more from COPAC. So when I refer to COPAC, this is the co-op over there. They started in '86, I believe, doing orange juice and citrus juice. And now they milk, they have yogurt, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, beef animals, and dairy animals. They're the second biggest co-op in the world. COPAC has 11,000 members. And I always like to ask them, so how many employees do you have? When you're going through the city, you would see big buses lined up and have COPAC on the side. So they would send buses into the city to pick up employees and haul them back to the factory. The straightest answer I got was 18,000 employees, and maybe more than twice that indirect employees. So that's a pretty big deal. They actually export to China and all over the world. Funny story on the way home, flying on the way home, they gave us drinkable yogurts. I looked at the package and it says, packaged and distributed by COPAC. Cool, I was just there. So this gives you a little idea of where the hotel was at. This is the highway back to the hotel. And by the way, you see that tree? It's illegal to cut a palm tree over there. You will go to jail if you get caught. So when a palm tree's in the middle of the road, they just build a road around it. And this is an irrigation canal on the right-hand side there. Actually, cut this video off and started another one, I think, to get all the way back into the hotel. Everything was in compounds. Everything's built in compounds. Go ahead and start the second one here. So pay attention to the top of the buildings here. See the rebar sticking out the top? Here you can see a couple more. So what happens, a couple gets married to live in the bottom story. They have kids and their kids marry, kids move to the next story. They keep building up. They can't afford it. So you see 5-story houses. Grandpa and grandma living in the bottom, their parents are living in the second story, the kids are from there on up. Almost every, like, why don't they just cut that off? Oh, no. That's for future building projects. Even their electric poles were concrete. You can see that one on the left. Wood is hard to come by. They have these little argon trees, which is the trees you see there. They give off a nut, and they use it very similar to what we would use peanut butter for. Yeah, it's a little spooky driving back in there. So right here is our hotel now. Everything was gated off. Beautiful on the inside, but getting back there is like, where are we going? All right, so this is my first day at the isolation facility. So they don't have roofs. They have we call them soddy barns in the dairy industry, like just open lots with shade over top of them. That green thing is just shade over top of the feed alley. And it was huge. Here's a sunset from one of those places. Tractor parked on the outside. As the girls are laying back in the shade there. So the gentleman on the left is the vice president of COPAC. The guy next to him is actually the manager of their beef facility. They have 10,000 beef animals in this facility. He manages that, which is just probably 2 miles from where we're standing there. And then the other guy is one of the operating officers of COPAC as well. And they would come by a couple times a week to catch up and just see how things are going. So after the animals were over there, guess what? They had to be revaccinated, re-tagged, and blood drawn to make sure they're pregnant and everything else. The process had to start all over. Even though we had all the paperwork to prove it that we did it, they have to do it themselves. Another picture of the feed alley. This picture you might have seen on Facebook. I mean, why would you take one load or 2 loads when you get it all in one? I looked at that and just laughed. And the funny thing is, you see them right down the road. Like, I mean, that's normal. Not just this truck, but you see them almost every day. Poles and ropes. And the time it took to stack that. And by the way, it was all done by hand too. See the guy in the next picture, you can see the guy on top unloading. And another guy on the floor stacking it. Those guys would get 100 dirhams a week, which would be about $11.91, and that was a very good paying job for those guys. So meal times were interesting. Food was very good, but different. So that is tagine. We would have bread. We would break the bread, split it in half, and we would eat with our fingers. No forks required. Most of these guys are veterinaries that are sitting there with me. That's how you do it right there. Actually, tagine was an interesting dish. That's one they eat that almost every day. They put the meat in the center and then they just pile it up with veggies, whatever veggies you want, and you cook it for about 2 hours. So they would always bring big square bills in with a forklift, set them down, and then they would do everything else by hand. I sent this picture to my boss, Matt Andrews, and said, hey, you ever wonder what an African TMR mixer looks like? Here you go. For you dairy farmers, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they even swept it by hand. And then we started having a couple babies. And that one on the left is a little premature. He's doing okay, but he was about a month early, just due to all the stress of shipping and everything. I got this first cow. I don't know if you can see where her tongue's at. That's how a cow cleans her nose. I'll let you get a kick out of that.
Are they happy?
They're not very happy yet. This was like day number 2, and you can see they're like, they'd rather lay down and rest, which who can blame them? So here we have some food. So the picture on the right is probably as close to American as you can get. There's mustard chicken and barbecued hamburgers with French fries and veggies. The salad, on the other hand, is kind of interesting. That's what they call a Moroccan salad. They have a pinch of tuna on top, which I love tuna. So I got along with that okay, besides the onions, which I got shoved to the side. I'm not an onion guy. So the next couple slides are just going to be a couple food. This is bean soup with meatball tagine. That white stuff is not cheese, it's an egg. That's one thing I've never seen a whole lot over there is cheese. I don't know why. The country's made up of Muslims, Jews, and Catholic. And I don't know, is it a religious thing or something over there, but they don't have a whole lot of cheese. Here's breakfast. Breakfast is omelets and pancakes, along with cakes, coffee, and juice. This is 2 different kinds of tagine. That one got egg and dates on top. Tagine, I had it in lamb, goat, beef, chicken, and fish. And by the way, a goat's not all that bad. Here's another Moroccan salad and another tagine. Here is the fish and lemon tagine. That was really good. The one on the right is what they call kush kush. Fridays is their religious day. Fridays you eat kush kush with buttermilk. And it's actually a milk with some herbs that makes it kind of bitter. Really good though, but it also had meat and veggies, and then there's cornmeal around the bottom there. Fruit. They had the best fruit I ever ate. Everything's tree ripened. If you never had a tree ripened banana, you never eaten a banana. And their strawberries, huge. And this guy on the top there on the right is actually an orange. I didn't grab it at first because I thought it was a lemon because how yellow it was. But they told me you gotta try this, and it was phenomenal. Oh, here's my pet. Recognize her? So you ever wonder what cows do when they're bored? Let me show you. She's like, wait a minute, were you videotaping that? That's how it was. Here's another picture of the barns. See them, they're all up eating. Now, sorry about this picture, the windshield was dirty, but you see this so much. A guy on a moped and his buddy didn't have one, so he just gave him a lending hand. You see that a lot. This is their taxi service. You just pile them on the back as much as you can. Most of these are schoolgirls going to school. This is their trash man. I couldn't get a good picture of him, but he got that black bucket dumping trash in there. There's a tractor in front pulling that. You can see the building, the blocks, the rebar sticking out the top. Kind of poor village here. I don't know what he was hauling, but you see a lot of these little, almost like a motorcycle with a little pickup bed on the back. And they're just loaded down like crazy. So here's a picture out of the restaurant, towards the pool. Another picture of the pool. Let me tell you, that place is beautiful. So this picture, the one on the left is the moon in the palm trees, and then there's a sunset on the right there. Yes, the flowers were blooming in February over there. We always had roses on the table, at the dinner table. Their hospitality was phenomenal as well. They see you coming, they were pulling back your chair. We don't do that around here. We're too independent. But that's what they do. So the next picture is my roommate. I actually went down and grabbed my shoe to put it into him because he was a pretty big critter. After I took a picture of it, I was like, well, he just wants to live like I do. So we had a little discussion and we came to this terms of understanding that you stay on that side of the headboard, I'll stay on this side of the headboard. So I let him go. That night when I put my head on the pillow, I just wondered how many disobedient children he has. Yes, that's public restrooms there. I thought about installing those at home. I think it would keep the boys from hoarding the restroom for 30 minutes. I looked at them like, oh Lord, I don't know. I don't need to know how well I can balance myself. The buckets on the right, they have Islam, so they have their prayer times 5 times a day. And that's for their washing. This is a normal scene here. A lot of shepherds alongside the road. Some of them literally a couple feet off the highway. And some had camels out there, just feeding their sheep right alongside the road. This is a little coffee shop where we hung out at a couple times in the afternoons. Very cool place. That waterfall's in the back, and then there's a little water feature there. It's just an outdoor coffee shop. There are the guys just shooting a breeze. I had no clue what they're talking. And by the way, Morocco had some awesome, awesome coffee. I don't know how they made it or what they did, but it was very good. This was an inner court of the hotel. This was the pool at night and another sunset. So the next slide is going to be, remember around here we always say, think safety. You just think it, you don't have to do it. Literally, those guys that just wire, that's what's their extension cords. They're on top of the roof putting plastic over the bedding area on top. I walk past there and I said, they just got it taped together. And then I'm getting over the pluck and where they pluck it in, I'm like, oh my goodness. So don't worry about being safe, just think it, that's it. Oh, here are the girls greeting me the next one morning. Couple more babies, those are always the highlight. Girls waiting on their feet, they had the concentrate and rolled corn in those bags, so the girls always knew that was like the candy for them. So they were always waiting for that. Another picture of the feed alley. Taking care of a baby. Towards the end, I was there 12 days. Towards the end, I think we had a total of 20 babies. So we were there. It was time for them to go out to get them moving on to the next farm. There's a mama and her baby, and then we let the baby be with the mama for a couple hours to get cleaned off, and then we would feed the baby, put them in their own pen. So one Friday, this black gentleman, he was actually out on the ship. He's a dairy farmer. He was out on the ship helping unload the ship. And it's kind of odd. I have no clue what he was saying. He had no clue what I was saying, but we kind of struck a friendship. And so he invited me that one Friday over to his house for a meal and tour his dairy. So that's a picture of him. And I always called him Michael Jordan. He understood that. He knew what Michael Jordan was. And that was his farm manager that's standing there with us. I was invited into his house for a meal. Pretty precious. This little garage out there. And literally all the branch pile there, that was actually used for heating and cooking. Because wood is actually spares, they would use everything. This is his milking parlor. Some of his cows. This is an interesting picture. I was walking down the barn and this one donkey on the right was just standing there eating. I'm like, what do you do with that? And one of the guys that was with me, he pointed down the other alleyway, and that's the donkey on the left. They go out and cut it by hand, throw the forage or whatever it is, looks like wheat or something, onto the cart. All they have to guide the donkey is a stick. It has no holder or anything on it. And he comes in, throws everything off by hand. And that guy was probably making close to $5 an hour, or not $5 a day doing that. It's kind of crazy because I was talking to my wife and she's like, yeah, it's below zero here, and over here they're getting ready to plant their veggies in these fields. This is an orange grove. This was one Sunday afternoon we had off, and then we took off up into the mountains. So some of these pictures are headed towards that mountain now. So when you get out, so a lot of the more poor villages and stuff, this is what their field would look like. You see the green grass between the rocks and the trees. That was actually an agriculture field. They would actually harvest that by hand. So going up the mountains here, there's a little village down there in the corner, or down there in the valley. It's beautiful up through here. You can see the villages out there. A couple more villages out in the distance. Every once in a while you see a shepherd out there with his herd of goats and sheep. So here we're riding on the clouds. No guardrail. That rail on the left-hand side there, that means the road has been built up because you're out over a cliff, because they couldn't cut a road in there, so they built it up. And a lot of people would bike up here for exercise. This guy that's taken me up there, his buddies were biking. Later on here in the slides, I'll show you where we stopped for tea in a little cafe up there. But literally, you could have spent days up in there. So beautiful.
That's snow?
Yes, that's snow. About 42 degrees up there. And down at the hotel, it was probably around 70. The hunter in me also wants to go over there and hunt. So here's another couple 100 feet higher in elevation. So you have people stopping, taking pictures. Then all of a sudden you have a group of people and wonder how you're going to get past each other here. We made it. Oh, get out of the way. This guy's just taking his half out of the middle. That's just normal driving there. So they call this the summit. Still more up there, but you'd have to walk up there. There's no roads up further. We just stopped and got out and took some pictures. Pretty much straight down right there. There you can see the road in the valley where we drove in at. The cool part about over there, they would actually take their kids up in the mountains and play in the snow. Here we grumble about snow. There they love it. Here's the video of the small cafe that we stopped at on the way back down. We actually stopped on the way up to have tea, and then on the way back to have dinner. It takes a minute to spin in here. Betsy's still thinking about it. Yeah, this was like halfway up the mountain, and they just tucked back in. This is actually a picture leading away from it. I did a total 360 of a video here, if it's gonna load. So I think I'll get it back. Come on. At this point, I would always tell my wife, "You just need a little more patience." Oh, I can't skip it, that froze. 16 more slides to go. Sorry about that, guys. I think we just got a brain cramp here. Literally just froze up. Doing somersaults.
Do that again if you had the chance?
If I would, I probably would. I don't know, the question was, would I do it again if I had a chance? I probably would. It was a trip of a lifetime. The only thing I didn't like was being away from home so long. Because I was over there in Pennsylvania in isolation probably four or 5 days, hon, before we actually loaded the ship. So yeah, I was close to a week over there before we actually got them onto the ship. So, you know, it was a long time away from home. All right, so we got to restart it here. So let me get to the right page here real quick. Running. If you Google Holstein Express, I think you could find where it's running at. But yeah, they're almost running nonstop.
Well, one of the things that I read, that after these cows got off, they were going to Portugal to get goats and sheep?
Goats and sheep and stuff, yeah.
So how many pregnant cows were on board?
So all 1,800 were pregnant. That was one of the qualifications. They had to be pregnant. So these were all heifers, not necessarily cows. So they were getting ready to have their first baby when they got into the country. All right, so let's go ahead and try, see if she's gonna agree with me here. So here, this is the little cafe, marketplace, halfway up the mountain. See the dog on top of the roof there, wagging his tail? Everything's just butted up into the mountain there. That's a little marketplace. This is the guy's home there. You can't even see the top. And there's the restaurant, 2-story restaurant.
They don't have lawn care out there.
No. Their lawn cares are called sheep and goat. So here's the ravine right next to the road. It's got a little stream of water trickling across. It would literally trickle right across the road. That's kind of neat. So here we are on the inside enjoying our coffee. Their coffee tastes more like coffee/tea. It almost half, that's my tour guide there. It almost have like a herbal spices in their coffee. So this is on the way home. This is tagine when it gets handed to you.
Oh.
look at it blowing still there in front of you. That's some mighty good stuff, and that was goat that day. So here we are on the way home, or the way down the mountain. Yeah, we're right on the edge.
So how fast are you going?
Probably, I don't know, everything was in kilometers, maybe 40. It wasn't that fast. The video makes it look fast, but there's no guardrails neither. But the scenic, I mean, it is so scenic out through there. It's like so beautiful, even though it's just a rock.
Did your tour guide do the driving too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it was his vehicle.
Mhm.
So I'm now looking back on the road that we just, that's what, on the far side, there's the road that we just came across. So here's a little video walking into the hotel, give you an idea of all the hibiscus. And it's a long way back in there. And this was their maintenance shed over here on the left. And that other building there on the left is the night watch cabin. So you ring the doorbell at the gate, it would ring at his cabin. So on these buildings on the left, if you look at real close at their windows, you got one coming up here. You see you have the opening at the bottom or top, and then you have the things at the bottom. And that is a Muslim religion. The woman is not supposed to show her whole face. So when she's talking, she talks through the bottom of that window. The man talks through the top. Thought it was an interesting fact from over there. A lot of them had that old traditional windows in them. That way, if the woman was in the house and wanted to talk to somebody, she wouldn't have to cover her head. So here's the inner court of the to the hotel. I thought it was so neat. They're mowing grass in February. Alongside the walls are full of roses.
What are their walkways made
Concrete. A lot of concrete over there.
of? It's got.
As they have those stamped in them. It's really nice.
Did you lose any of the heifers going over?
We did. Unfortunately, we lost 3 of them. Yeah. We lost 1 at sea and then 2 at the port during that delay. Unfortunately, we did. Excuse me, buddy. So they had these neat little cactus gardens, and I'm a flower lover myself, but they just had these neat little cactus gardens. I'm still not at my hotel. Imagine walking that distance at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, where are we going?
How did you keep the ship clean?
Keep the ship clean with pressure washer. They had they wouldn't pump their water in. There's actually a protocol. I didn't realize that, but they could flush at sea if they're a certain miles away from land. So they could flush that at sea, be disposed at sea. And they had like fire hose hookups, and they would just wash that down. And as soon as they were far away from unloading, the guys were washing 24/7. He said, if the inspector finds a speck of manure as big as your thumbnail, no good. So it literally had to be, When we first got on the ship, when it was still empty, you could have ate off the floor. It was that clean. Yeah, I was surprised and amazed at how clean everything was. So finally got to our hotel room. So here's the girls having breakfast. And if you stand in the pen long enough, everybody comes up and sees what's going on. Cows are curious creatures. So here's my little buddy, the last baby I helped deliver over there. Here's my last meal in Morocco, chicken tagine with a Moroccan salad. I did set the onions back. So here's my ride home. I actually got up 5 o'clock in the morning. We drove 2 hours to Agadir. From Agadir, I flew to Casablanca, which is way up north, and then from Casablanca into JFK.
Non-stop.
Non-stop from Casablanca to JFK. And it's kind of interesting. We flew out, let me get my map right here. We flew out at 4 in the afternoon, 4:05 departure, and I arrived at JFK at 6 o'clock, and we had an 8-hour flight. Remember the time changes, I had 6 hours of time changes to go through. So this is from a recycled tire, an art that was in Casablanca, made out of recycled tire. I thought it was just pretty cool. So here's what it's like to be flying above the clouds. Ever heard of the phrase on cloud 9? Well, I was, because I was headed home. So here's my first sign of life outside the airplane, coming into Long Island, New York right here. See the ships out in the distance, beautiful sunset. And we're home again. So that was actually in Andrews this springtime. Another sunset. This is a hilltop video from Andrews Farm. So I'm all the way on top of one of the highest points there on the farm. That's the farm there in the background. I was out there mowing grass this spring, so took the opportunity to do a 360. So does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, this was a wonderful program, right? You feel like you were there. He took great pictures of everything. He talked about the people, on the ship, the cows, the land, the food. We got a complete tour, right, from Joe Miller today. So I just want to thank all of you again for coming. And I want to thank Joe for coming and giving us such a great program. And I will put our film up on the website, and we'll talk about whether or not those other people who are on the waiting list, I'll be giving them a call and see what we'll do about that. But thank you all for coming. Don't forget, check out what the library offers, and come back and see us again. Thank you, Joe, so much. Thank you.